Good morning, all. My name is Charles Lee, Insights and Engagement Specialist. I'll be facilitating our session today. I'm joining you this morning from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I want to extend my appreciation for the opportunity to live and work here with my family on this shared territory. Thank you for joining us this morning for a 45-minute session on climate risks to the safety system. Today, we'll be discussing climate change in BC and some of the hazards we've seen and engaging with your relay experiences. This will be followed by a Q&A period. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation. I'd like now to welcome our presenters, Coral Buitenhuis, Technical Safety BC's Leader of Climate Action and Sustainability, and Inez Bozorgzada, our Senior Advisor, Climate Action and Sustainability.
Thank you, Charles. To start our presentation, I want to invite everyone to answer a poll which should appear on your screen. We're asking that you please share your name, your role, where you're joining us from today, and what brought you to the breakout session today. If you don't want to share your name, you can still participate anonymously. I will now stop talking for a few moments so that you can answer those questions. Great, thank you. So our climate action team was established in 2020 in response to our acknowledgement that climate change is a major emerging safety risk. We recognized that we needed to start taking steps both to mitigate climate change and to adapt to climate change. The three main pillars of our work are here in the gray, blue, and green boxes. Starting with the gray box, we are of course reducing our organization's own greenhouse gas emissions and identifying adaptation opportunities for people and buildings. I won't talk about this anymore today. Instead, I'll focus on the next two items, which are more relevant to this group, I think. Our second pillar here in blue is climate change mitigation. And we do this by supporting provincial efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We are aligning our priorities with the province's Clean BC plan, and we see our main role as enabling the safe adoption of low carbon technologies like heat pumps, electric vehicle chargers, electric vehicle energy management systems, renewable energy systems, batteries, hydrogen, and many more. Our third pillar here in green is focused on identifying safety risks to technical equipment and systems so that we can adapt to make the safety system safer and more resilient. And this is the focus of our discussion with you here today. This year, we are actively researching the risks that climate change events like heat waves, wildfires, and floods create for the equipment that we regulate. We're collaborating with the Climate Action Secretariat to align our program with the province's climate preparedness and adaptation strategy. Our focus this year is in developing a high-level inventory of climate change risks to technical equipment and systems that we regulate. This June, on June 23rd, we're hosting a climate safety summit to begin to assess the current situation with technical safety and climate change resiliency. Everyone in this room is invited to participate, so please mark your calendars and keep an eye out for registration details coming soon. Moving on, going to cover BC's climate projections. So overall, our province is projected to be less cold, more wet, in the future. We will have more frequent heat waves and precipitation will be more intense. With more rain and snowpack combined with higher temperatures, we can expect more risk of flooding. With extended wet periods, tree roots and soil will be weakened, resulting in more fallen trees and storms and risk of more power outages. Interior regions will continue to have higher wildfire risk from hotter, drier summers and increased flood risk in shoulder seasons. We will also have more tropical nights over 20 degrees, more droughts, as well as coastal sea level rise. In the north, precipitation will increase in all seasons, including summers, and it's projected that we will have considerably warmer summers. Moving on now to technical systems interaction with climate extremes. So technical systems interaction with climate extremes like flood and fire is not new. What is new is that climate change is making these interactions more frequent, and the economic and service losses are imposing greater consequences on our communities. During 2021, all of you know, our province was severely impacted by a variety of extreme weather events, including the summer heat dome, another extended forest fire season, and of course, the costliest natural disaster in BC's history, the November atmospheric river floods. I'd like to share a couple of examples of interactions of these climate extremes with the safety system. Starting out with the heat dome, during the heat dome last June, we encountered a high-risk situation involving a pressurized bank of compressed natural gas cylinders that had been abandoned in a high-density urban area. And this is the picture on the left. As temperatures rose, the cylinders released natural gas into the atmosphere, as well into an adjacent building's HVAC system. We saw extreme heat intensify the danger, putting surrounding communities at risk. The two other pictures on this slide show the impact of November's floods, which caused significant damage to many technologies. The mix of debris and chemical in floodwaters resulted in total loss of assets in most cases. But there were some success stories. Although there were major losses for many, there was a notable sense of community and support from everyone involved during that event. And I want to share one quick story to show what I mean. Many of the elevating devices in the Fraser Valley have an operation maintenance staff who's responsible for them. While they were evacuating the area with their families, these individuals stopped at their job sites and raised the elevators above flood levels. This simple and thoughtful act reduced damage significantly for elevators in the area. The impacts of the 2021 extreme weather events are still being felt at the community level, with nearly 600 lives lost to the heat dome and recovery efforts still underway for the floods. I want to now ask for your input again. You'll see another poll pop up on Zoom. This time, we are wondering, how have extreme weather events affected the technical systems and equipment in your community or your job site or your home? I know that a lot of us experienced a lot of discomfort at home during the heat wave, and a lot of us experienced changes at work as well. So we're asking you to share your experience, and I'll again stop talking and give you a few moments to respond. Right, so one person shared with us that during the heat wave in their home, there were health concerns with an elderly parent. That was the experience of many people during the heat wave. Another comment. Requirement to design based on future extrapolation, i.e. flood levels. Yes, definitely. Considering future climate realities in today's design standards. All right, it looks like we have many poll answers. Looking forward to taking a look at those later. All right, and one more comment that I'll read before passing it to Inez. Some calls regarding heat pumps not being capable of keeping up to the desired temperature during the extreme cold and heat. Yeah, heat pump technology is definitely advancing, and some heat pumps are not quite ready to keep up with those extremes yet. Thank you, everyone, for your answers and for bearing with us as we navigate new technologies. I'll now pass it over to Inez to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Coral, and hello, everyone. Let's continue our conversation with some thoughts on climate safety considerations. Climate safety includes preparing for extreme weather events, as well as considering long-term gradual changes that we'll experience in our province over the years to come. Some climate hazards will be experienced as short-duration, high-intensity events, such as flooding, while others are experienced as more frequent new normals, such as heat waves and air quality issues from forest fire particulates. Climate safety solutions may not be one size fits all, while the interaction between climate hazards and technical equipment will vary depending on the application and location of their service. For example, consideration of overheating and air quality in HVAC design for a community center, which would be used as a refuge for evacuees, is of higher priority than a school that is planned to be closed with no occupancy during summer months. We can consider taking steps toward climate safety in a similar manner as we already consider earthquake resiliency in our province. Structures are designed in varying levels of importance to stand through an earthquake. Similarly, for climate safety, we need to think about the priority infrastructure that needs service continuity in our communities and make technologies within those spaces climate-proof first. Let's do another poll. With the variabilities in climate safety considerations, we'd like to hear what safety risks, hazards, and opportunities do you see looking ahead? And we've kind of put the two ends, risks, hazards, and opportunities, in the same question because we want to highlight that climate change is not just about challenges, but there may also be opportunities to leverage and take note of. So over the past decade, we've been transitioning to higher efficiency condensing boilers for heating plants and installing solar photovoltaic for on-site power production as a way to reduce emissions. As heat waves and floods become part of our new normal, we're adding new cooling capacity to facilities and installing sump pumps to remove floodwaters to incorporate resiliency. We're now in the next transition, and many of you may already be doing this, to combine heating and cooling service by installing heat pumps, considering flood maps and installing equipment above flood construction levels, and incorporating site-level resiliency by installing battery banks for power self-sufficiency. This is low-carbon resiliency. To avoid making a moving target of climate change resiliency, we need to capture every opportunity to reduce emissions globally and locally. We can do this for the safety system technologies by installing low-carbon solutions, ensuring efficient operations as per design intent, and practicing safe decommissioning at the end of the life cycle of technical systems. In our next poll, we'd like to invite you to take a moment to reflect on what you see as your next step to manage safety risks related to climate change. And just to get your thoughts flowing, maybe you're already doing something related to addressing climate change risks. Maybe you want to, but not sure where to start and how to prioritize where to start. So think about what is your greatest strength and how you might leverage that quality to manage safety risks related to climate change. I'll share one example as we give another few seconds for folks to put in their thoughts about their next steps. Let's use elevators as an example. The next step to making an elevator flood resilient, for example, as we saw in the Fraser Valley, the pits were getting flooded. And so maybe the next step is to add a sump pump to remove the water from the elevator pit. And then maybe the step after that is to remove the pit altogether and work with tractionless elevators. And then maybe the final step will be to have fire and earthquake resilient elevators in place in our building facilities. Gives you an idea of the steps we can take towards full resiliency. Thank you for sharing your thoughts there, and we're looking forward to reading the poll results afterwards. Some thoughts on next steps for climate preparedness. We can prepare for long-term gradual changes of our climate by considering the life cycle of technical systems at design stage and utilizing climate projections to allow capacity, ideally modular capacity where possible, for the climate conditions through the end of life of equipment. And for the existing technical systems, we can incorporate periodic maintenance checks on systems throughout their life cycle to allow the opportunity to adjust for climate impacts and where needed, mitigate hazards before risk of failure occurs. Finally, we've compiled a few resources to share with you in case you'd like to explore and continue learning beyond today. These include research publications on topic of climate change and how it's impacting the various regions and communities, case studies for adapting for resiliency to climate change, and some credible sources for future climate data. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we'll wrap up with one final poll. We'd like to hear what stood out for you from today's discussion. What are your takeaways from this session? So I'll end poll here, and I'll pass it back to my colleague Charles to open our Q&A period.
Thanks, Inez. We're now going to answer some of your questions. It looks like we already received some questions, and we welcome you to continue submitting your questions using the Q&A function on your screen. We have a question here. In a major fire or flood, how many of the affected appliances, hold on a sec here. How many of the affected appliances must be inspected before re-energizing? The code says all.
I know we had a bit of experience with this during the November floods, and I know did some research after that. Do you want to answer that question?
I can acknowledge that it's a challenge, and the answer is yes, it is all, because to be safe, all of them do need to be checked by a licensed contractor before re-energization. And this is one of our challenges ahead as these extreme climates take more and more of the equipment offline, and there may be a wait time for all of them to be checked and folks being able to get back home. And that's exactly what we're here to address.
I see a question here in the chat. I'm going to try to read it here. It's around education for the new technologies. Do you know if there is going to be upgrading and or training for people with their gas B ticket to install residential heat pumps? Speaking to other HVAC techs, we don't believe there's enough refrigeration techs to fill the demand. Everyone is quite concerned with Vancouver and Richmond making them mandatory.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it is something that we are aware of, and it's something that we're actively looking into. But I don't have a definitive answer yet. So what I will say is to stay tuned over the next month and year, or I guess year-ish, and hopefully we'll have a bit more clarity soon. But it is it's a very good point, and we are aware.
Great, thank you so much, Coral. One question is, can you share some initiatives of how your staff has been contributing to supporting greenhouse gas emissions reduction at the organizational level?
Yeah. Again, so we have a kind of grassroots group that works on individual actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They're called the Sprouts, and they are always working out creative ways to reduce waste, reduce emissions from transportation. And then we also have a more formalized emission reduction plan at the organizational level, which includes transitioning our fleet vehicles to electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, for example. And that is rolling out, although our progress is unfortunately being stalled by the supply chain issues. So we are expecting electric vehicles at some point in the future. Yeah, so we have a couple of different things going on, and you can see in our 2021 annual report that we've started to measure our organization's greenhouse gas emissions, and so that enables us to then set targets to reduce our emissions. So you can expect more of that in the future from us.
Thank you, Coral. Our next question here is, what are some of the tangible steps that can be taken at an individual level to avoid climate risk?
I can take a pass at answering that. Thank you for the question. And it's so common to hear that these days, isn't it? With the year that we've had in 2021, it's on everybody's mind. Some of the steps we can take personally is just getting to know our environment better, getting to know our homes better, the limitations of where it might flood, where it might be too hot, where we have solar exposure that might make it more uncomfortable if there is a heat wave, where we might have air quality issues. And think about steps that we can take to use resources. Technical Safety BC has some that we'll be providing over the coming months as well, and through all of our campaigns we already do. And there's other resources externally as well. Use resources to get ideas about how to make our homes and our personal lives more resilient. So, you know, we talked about sump pumps. If you have a home that has lowered areas that you want to make sure you can remove the water. We can talk about having an emergency plan of like what happens if you have to evacuate, having a pack ready to be able to move quickly, as I'm sure many people in our communities experience in the Fraser Valley and interior. And around heat waves and air quality, we can consider making one room safe in the home. You don't need to have air conditioning for the whole house, but to do it in a kind of a prudent way without increasing emissions or having a big cost at hand, you can make one room safe and have either dedicated cooling to that space or just taking initial steps to reduce solar gain and provide shading to that space to know the cool spaces in your building that you can go to. In our family, we moved to the space that I'm at right now, which is close to the forest, and it's the coolest area. So we weren't actually sleeping in the house. We were sleeping in the garden by the forest, which was the best place, the coolest place to be during the heat dome last summer. And just using fans to provide passive cooling against our own body's natural way of cooling itself, which is sweating, and then evaporating that sweat creates evaporative cooling for you and makes you comfortable. Knowing your body's limit, I think 32 degrees is the point that we don't want to go higher in terms of ambient temperature for human health. And one of the resources I shared online, the climatedata.ca has some resources and case studies on human health and considering health factors in resiliency. Hopefully that gives some ideas, and definitely happy to continue conversation on this topic.
Thank you so much, Inez. Our next question: what is TSBC doing to support the climate resiliency of BC communities?
I can start that one. So our whole strategy is aimed at that. So we're taking the approach of understanding how climate change creates safety risks at the community level with an intention to reduce those risks through our regular risk control activities and more. And we're also working on enabling the safe adoption of low carbon technologies for communities in BC. So those are kind of our two overarching goals that help to build community resiliency. And I think it might be interesting for Inez to speak a little bit more about the climate resiliency program as well as it relates to that.
Sure, thanks, Coral. Yeah, just to elaborate on that, we are launching our climate resiliency program, which includes developing an inventory of the different climate risks against our different technology elements, going through each of our 7 technologies, element by element, tracking them against different climate hazards, interaction, and kind of identifying where there may be interactions, kind of a semi-quantitative assessment, risk assessment, if you will. These will be at hypothetical kind of scenario-based assessments. And then we're looking forward to also, I think we will be sharing with you in a moment, we're looking forward to engage externally as well with all of you and beyond through a climate safety summit that we're planning for June 23rd. And that's where we will want to kind of start getting a sense of what is everybody's vision and where do we want to go as a province for meeting our climate safety needs. So stay tuned for those additional events coming up.
Thank you, Coral Islands. Our next question: do you have an emergency action response team or procedure?
We do. We are in the process, though, of revisiting the way we respond to emergencies, just given that we have experienced so many in the last year. So we are coordinating as an organization across different teams and departments to understand how we can better respond and work with external organizations like Emergency Management BC and local governments. I think everyone's sort of learning in this area right now as we're experiencing more climate events and emergencies. And it's definitely something that we are also focusing on and trying to collaborate on as well.
We have a question here. Will we see more directives and our awareness directed toward worker safety when inspecting gas and electrical equipment exposed to environmental extremes? And will specific training criteria be developed for licensed individuals?
Yeah, so worker safety is more in the jurisdiction of WorkSafe, of course, but they they're also working on this. They're trying to understand the emerging climate risks and hazards, just like we are, to try to improve safety. The question around specific training for licensed individuals, I don't have a definitive answer for that yet, but I will say we are looking into how we can adjust all of our risk control activities, and licensing contractors is one of those, to build climate safety. So that's definitely an area that we're looking into to see if it's a good way to reduce safety risk.
And thank you, attendees, for sharing with us your questions. It looks like we're almost out of time. That brings an end to our session today. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for sharing your insights on climate change and technical safety in BC. I would like to remind everyone that a recording of this session will be available in the coming week on our website, which you can share with your colleagues and networks. Lastly, we have some great opportunities for you to get involved with and share your voice. Learn more about these events and our climate strategies by visiting engage.technicalsafetybc.ca. Thank you again, and have a great day.